Hi guys, how are you?
Good. How are
Good.
you?
I'm doing well. So obviously like Dalíland takes the idea that we have of Salvador Dali and shows us kind of his life through someone else's lens. And for you both, I want to know what was kind of the joy in getting to look at someone like this. It reminded me of The Great Gatsby in a way where it's like you're looking at someone who is larger than life through someone else's gaze. But what was it
Mm.
kind of like adapting that and making like what we see at Salvador Dali come to life while still making it original and new?
I mean, we definitely talked about The Great Gatsby as a model, with the Nick Carraway character, because, you know, Dali and Gala are so larger than life. Someone described them as sacred monsters, and it's very hard. I think there's so much, there'd be a lot if you're spending every moment with them. And also there's something in genius in Dali that's unknowable. So he wanted someone who would be like us, who would be the audience, right?
Yes. I think we also felt that when writing personal scenes that had to do with Dali and Gala, that getting inside those scenes and imagining what they would say in toto, that it would destroy the mystery, that you're giving away too much.
Mhm.
And by having James, he's picking up fragments. He's had a piece there, a window there into Dali and Gala.
Mhm.
And with him we would go into that. But it was tricky to otherwise form the structure for a drama around the two of them, strictly because we felt it's going to kind of give away too much, and also things that we felt we fundamentally didn't understand or know.
Mhm.
And Mary, your movies have a theme of people who are obsessed with music to like an almost odd degree. Because like even in Charlie Says, like everyone kind of knows Charles Manson's like he went insane because he couldn't be successful with his music. In this, there's still the music element. I'm wearing my favorite movie of all time is American Psycho, and like that has the music elements. And so for you though, what is it about kind of like music in your films that like plays into these characters? Because it is so cool to kind of see it like this is the third time I was like, yeah, there's another music person who's obsessed with music.
I know it's funny. I mean, this was sort of by chance, and the oddest thing that we found out in the story. It's funny. Someone just asked me what the oddest thing was, and I remembered it now after the interview, which is that Gala was in love with the star of Jesus Christ Superstar. I mean, it's so bizarre and so weird, and that he saw himself and she felt that he was going to be this great artist and that his songs would change the world. And so, yes, there's, so, but I mean, going into it, I don't think we saw that music side, but I love that. I love that aspect of the story. And I love, you know, um, and, and Zach, who played Jeff Enholt, he actually wrote those songs, um, you know, sort of in the style of the Jeff Enholt's music. And this belief, these aspirations towards genius, that, and Gala's delusion that she had found another genius is very poignant and really, significant. Plus, you add the fact that he was friends with Alice Cooper. That's just so weird and so great that you wouldn't have made it up.
And I don't think he particularly liked Alice Cooper's music. I think he liked Alice Cooper's identity.
Yeah.
Of what he represented culturally. It was like, what is the cultural expression of Alice Cooper, and what does that mean? And he felt a resonance with that.
Although he did love punk, apparently. He liked the Sex Pistols, for their attitude. And I would have loved to get a scene where James played him the Sex Pistols,
Yeah.
but somehow it didn't make it.
For the same reason you did.
Yeah, it's attitude. It's yeah, exactly. And I think he was to the end of his life, a very anarchic person.
And like John, obviously, like you are not to piggyback, but I was going to ask, you are bringing real people to life with this script because it is like Alice Cooper. It is very funny because the man who starred in Jesus Christ Superstar, I'm a big musical theater nerd, and I'm like, I don't remember this man. Like it was just like a guy. I was like, oh right, that man who I've never heard of.
Yeah.
Post this show. But when you're bringing those real life elements into something like this that is in itself about someone we know, what are the challenges of kind of being honest to these people while still making it like funny that Alice Cooper's kind of just hanging around, and you're like, yeah, that's the guy who sings School's Out for Summer.
Yeah,
I mean, I think we always begin with research.
yeah.
Mhm.
And Mary's fantastic on research, having done that so much through her documentary work, and did an immense amount of the research. And then I did some as well. And then we sort of would talk through the story and see what seemed, at each point, you wanted to be faithful to an essential truth about who we felt that character was. So even when you were imagining a scene, a character in the scene, you were trying to not veer away from what you believed that that character was potentially, truly capable of, or capable of saying. That was kind of important to both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mary, I'm not saying this lightly, and I know I am wearing the shirt, but you are one of my favorite directors, and I think, and have been since I watched American Psycho when I was 12 in like 2002, when I should not have, but it's fine. But I think you have such a way of like telling these stories about complicated men from like a female perspective, and like, so it makes it more fascinating from my perspective, a female audience watching it. And so when you do tell these stories about men and kind of the women in their lives and how they use them, because again, like Charlie says, was about all of the women, even though it is a movie about Charles Manson, this is about Gala, even though it is Dalíland. What for you is kind of the joy in finding those stories about complicated men, but making it more about the women that is surrounding them?
Well, I think there's a bit of a kind of revision of history always going on in these. And if you read the sort of conventional, traditional biographies of Dali, I mean, Gala's presented as this kind of monster. She gets a very, very bad rap as this, crazy sort of virago that she's, and some of which is true. She did scream at people and kick people and behave in an outrageous way. She had an insatiable need for money and committed him to way too much work and kind of ran him into the ground. But that was also her being a refugee, Russian refugee during the Russian Revolution, and someone who always felt poor. And you sort of have to see her desire for survival, and also just give respect to, this is a woman who devoted her entire life to Salvador Dali. I mean, body and soul. She did everything for him. She promoted him. She did all the practical stuff. He was as incapable as a child, on any practical details. And then there comes a point in America after they first arrive in Hollywood and then make their way to New York, where, having been this celebrated art couple, the spotlight is on Salvador Dali as the star, and she fades into the background. And this sort of the bitterness and the pain of that, of being excluded and being an older woman, and then he has the beautiful new muse, Amanda. And so there's this pain of the older wife. And I wanted to get that this is a complex woman, and
Yeah.
and she has,
Yeah, and I was gonna say, John, in your screenplay, what I really enjoy is that it is like Salvador Dali is not innocent in his, because he still has his moments where he is being kind of overbearing and controlling about his art and his process, which I feel like is cherished almost in art, where it's like the man does these outrageous things for his art and we cherish it, but the women who have to deal with it are seen as monsters. And so was that something that you kind of found through writing it, or is it just something that came across as the process as a whole came together?
I think that that was kind of clear clear at Hello with Dali and Gala, that there was this way in which they were continuously acting out and tearing each other apart, even as they clung to one another. And that they both were kind of, I mean, to James at least, sacred monsters, people who have these extraordinary qualities that can transform the lives of those around them, and yet are in many ways impossible to deal with. And yet we you know, as Mary would say, our lives are bigger for having known them. And we treasure those kinds of people. So Dolly, yes, it's absolutely true that it's usually focused on the man. It's sort of, oh, he's being, you know, overbearing, he's being difficult, but he's an artist, he's a genius. You know, so it was interesting to deal with that dynamic of the duo.
Yeah, speaking of dynamics, obviously you guys are married and you're doing this together, you're adapting. That does come with I think an advantage, because you have, I'm assuming, a shorthand in how you talk about things creatively. Is that though ever challenging when it's like one idea wants to overpower the other, or do you guys just have a process that works very well as a collaboration?
I think in the writing process, it's extremely smooth, because I think our worldview, despite our individual, you know, the films that I've done or that I would do separately from Mary are very different. Our essential worldview is very similar, and our values are very similar. The things we find funny or absurd are so close, which is why we're together. So you'd look at a scene or a moment and you'd both agree, yes, that has to go in, or no. And then maybe I'd say maybe 10% of the time or less, you'd disagree, or you'd go back and forth and quibble about something, and you iron those out. And then very often I would write a scene, and Mary would have ideas for rewriting it, and she would rework it and make it better. So we play around with things quite a bit.
And also, I think the advantage is that you're talking about it a lot. You're just talking about it over breakfast, or you're talking about it when you're driving somewhere in the car. It just sort of comes up spontaneously. So a lot of the work that you do when writing screenplays, I think, or creating a project is not when you're actually sitting down and writing. It's when your mind is working on it.
Yeah, I mean, an enormous amount of our process is talking through before even putting a pen to paper or a finger to the keyboard. It's talking and talking and talking about what's important, and that sort of shapes the story when we've worked together. And then boom, you know, write the first draft. You know, our children were completely sick and tired of hearing about Salvador Dali by the time we were done with it. It was with us for years, but every time we rewrote it, we were like, oh, we're going to get to do a rewrite, which we never feel, because it's such a fun, crazy world.
Yeah, they're so over us. Yeah.
They're like, and no, I don't want to hear Dolly ever again. But Mary, obviously, though, you've done a lot of documentary work, and 2 of your movies are about like these real people. Is it easier for you to go back and forth between documentary work with these more sort of like biopics of people we know, even though it is like a fantastical look at them? Is it easier because you've done all of this documentary work?
I mean, it's certainly easier to do research. I mean, one thing that I learned, and this was before I ever made a film, was that if it was something that I knew a lot about, someone's life story, and I would go and see a biographical film, and there would be kind of like a Hollywood, they would have put it through a Hollywood template, you know, they would have left behind a lot of the real stuff and just made it just like a classic Hollywood narrative. And I was disappointed by that. I was like, well, why don't you do the real story? Why don't you do, you know, even though it's more messy or more kind of lumpy, it's real and interesting and has more character. So I always felt, before I ever made a movie, if I was going to make a movie, I would try and stick as much. So that's my mantra, is you try and stick to the truth as much as possible. And then there's times when you simply have to alter the chronology, or, you know, emphasize one relationship more than it was in real life. But I think keep the lumpiness and the sort of spikiness of real life.
And the oddities. What's interesting is that there was a tension between, I lean toward a more classical storytelling structure, and Mary's always pushing away from that, to the extent that, well, the truth was, this is what happened in their lives, or this is how he behaved. And so she would force me in that direction in writing the script, to say, trust that this is going to work, or that these contradictions will work. And that's kind of the script is really a product of both of our sensibilities.
I mean, sometimes I have to be pushed to say, you know, you're not going to go to hell if you change the actual chronology of real
Or if you have a
Mhm.
song that wasn't recorded by the time the film was made and was from 1975. Oh,
you can do it, you know, you can do it. I have to be persuaded to let go a bit
Mhm.
of what really happened. But I still think that what you bring into it of the strange, to me, you know, the strangeness of real life, nothing beats it.
Yeah.
So always.
yeah, that's a really good way of saying it. We both embraced that in the end, especially with Dolly.
Yeah, I loved the movie, and Mary, I know I've brought it up so many times, but truly, thank you for American Psycho. It is my favorite movie. I've made so many people in my life watch this movie because I'm like, no, I love it. But also, if a man says it's his favorite, I'm like, but why though? I know why I like it, but why do you like it? So I need to unpack that.
One of the great mysteries for me and Guinevere was like we never expected American Psycho to be embraced by the very guys that it's about. It's like it's a mystery. It's like whoa.
I went to the musical and some guy was dressed like Patrick Bateman. I walked right up to him and I was like, why? And he was like, oh, I was like, no, you don't understand why I'm asking you why this man maybe murder people, how you interpret it, I don't know. But like, why you dressed like him at a musical about him? It was crazy.
It's something I would never predicted, never have imagined. But it's funny. I was having physical therapy on my back, and my physical therapist, who's Chinese, and she said that yes, you directed American Psycho. And she said my 14-year-old daughter, who's a Chinese American girl living in Staten Island, is going as Patrick Bateman for Halloween.
Oh, I love that though.
There's a Halloween costume you can buy online.
So it's like,
Oh.
whoa, good for her. It's like, this means it has reached areas I never imagined.
It is truly like I know I kept bringing it up, but it is like a movie that I just rewatched the other day for like the 50th time because I was like, it's just so funny in a way that I don't think like some people don't get. I'm like, this man flexed in a mirror while having sex with someone. It's the funniest thing I've ever seen.
Yes, I remember that was improvised by Christian in the rehearsal. But I think they're all comedies in some ways, to a greater or lesser extent. Even Dalíland is always comic. I hope gradually people get that.
Yeah, I hope they do too. Thank you for continuing to work with my favorite actors too, because I love Matt Smith. So I was having the time of my life watching your filmography. And I can't wait to see what you guys do next. I loved this movie very much. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. That was lovely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great one.
Sure.
Bye.